I was 4 years old when I first played Einhänder. My dad had a PlayStation with a handful of games, and most of them were way too scary or just too complicated for me to play alone at 4. He was a welder that worked on the pipeline, so he was gone a lot. So a lot of my early years of gaming was by myself, and Einhänder became one of the ones I just kept going back to. The first level is still one of my biggest core memories from that time. The city, the sound, the weapons, and a screen with a woman laughing as she turns into a skeleton. That moment has stayed with me for decades. And seeing it again now as an adult, it hit harder than I expected. It took me straight back to that old green carpet and that trailer in the middle of the woods. But playing this again now, it's really showed me how much this game was doing. The camera work, the presentation, the way every weapon you collect changes how you approach the level. It all fits together in a way that really stands out. Einhänder had this confidence you didn't see often in shooters on the PlayStation, and the way it blends that 2.5D movement with full 3D scenes, it still looks fantastic today. But what was Einhänder? Einhänder came out in 1997 in Japan, and then it came to North America the next year. And that landed right in the middle of Square's strongest period on the PlayStation. The studio just had success after success, and most of those projects were built around large RPG teams. But even with that focus, Square still had groups on smaller ideas. Einhänder came from that environment. It was a chance for one team to try something outside the usual lane. Square had the resources to support experiments like this. They were releasing major titles regularly, but they also had space for shorter projects that tested the hardware in different ways. Einhänder fits that approach. It wasn't tied to any franchise, and it didn't pull from earlier engines or assets. The team built it with a clear plan for visual presentation. They used 3D models on a 2D plane, and the camera followed the action in a way that gave each level a sense of momentum. The industrial style is one of the first things that stands out with it. The game moves through cities, factories, deserts, and mechanical structures with a steady pace. The backgrounds stay active. There's lights and moving parts, crumbling buildings, and it shifts in depth. Bosses enter the screen with clear animations, and enemies break apart in pieces as you shoot at them. Even early levels show how much attention was put into making the world feel busy. And the weapon system shaped the game's identity. Most enemies drop a gun pod you can attach to your ship, and each one has a different rhythm. Some fire in a straight line, some angle up or down, some burn through ammo quickly. Managing those options gives the game a strong loop. You collect a weapon, use it until it runs dry, and look for the next one. The pace stays extremely tight because every pickup changes your plan. Shoot-em-ups like this weren't a major force on consoles at the time. The genre had pretty much already peaked in the arcades and the older systems. Einhänder still earned strong reviews though. The critics were pointing out the camera work, the boss design, and just the overall polish of the game. But it didn't reach a wide audience, and part of that came from the timing. It released late in the PlayStation's life and never launched in Europe at all. But even with those limits, the people who played it remember it. Looking back, Einhänder sits in an interesting place in Square's history. It represents a short window where the studio was willing to put resources towards smaller teams with focused ideas. The project didn't need to connect to anything bigger. It only needed to be sharp and clear and just well executed. That mindset shows in every level here. You can see the work of a group that understood the hardware and built something with intent. The game opens with a look that sets the tone immediately. Like I had just mentioned, the team built it with full 3D models on a 2D plane, and that decision shaped the entire presentation. The camera tracks action through angled shots and slow sweeps that frame each area as you move forward. It gives the stages a sense of scale and keeps the world shifting around you in a way that just feels deliberate. You move along a fixed path, but the environment bends and turns while the camera adjusts to show the space from new perspectives. And the industrial style shows up super early. The first city level mixes buildings, lights, and moving structures that run through the background in these steady layers. And the depth on the screen gives the world a constant sense of motion. Later in the game, the stages lean more towards mechanical environments. Factories operate in the background, tunnels flash warning lights, or satellites rotate as you pass them. All of it adds this presence to the screen, and it makes every stage feel extremely unique and distinct. This camera work helps these areas feel alive. Bosses enter the screen with perspective shifts that highlight their size and the movement. Some start off in the distance, some rise from below, and some fly alongside you while the camera tilts to keep up with their patterns. These moments happen during gameplay. It's not cutscenes, so it keeps the pace consistent. The team found ways to use the PlayStation 3D tools in a side-scrolling structure, and that approach gave Einhänder a visual identity that really stands out. The ship designs follow that same direction. The Einhänder units use these sharp angles, exposed joints, these mechanical arms to reinforce the industrial style. The enemy ships follow this kind of design also. A lot of them break apart when destroyed and the pieces fall or spin in the background. Most of the enemies have sections that react to damage, and the bosses show movement in individual parts as they attack. All the animation work, it really keeps the screen active whenever you're trying to hold your position. And the UI really helps all this also. The display gives you clear readouts of your ammo, your weapon type, and your score. There's nothing that crowds the edges of the screen. The layout of it stays simple so the action remains readable at all times. And it really works because you can check your statuses immediately while not losing track of the environment. There's kind of a familiar energy here for people who spent time with shooters on the PlayStation. Games from Psygnosis had a certain confidence in their presentation during that era. Einhänder hits a similar note, but it carries that level of finish that Square's consistently delivered in the late 90s. The presentation feels directed, each stage moves with intent, every camera adjustment looks planned. The team had a clear idea of how they wanted the action to appear from the beginning to the end. Einhänder's visual identity still carries a ton of weight today. The presentation supports the action, and the camera adds movement without breaking pace. The environments stay active from one area to the next. It really set a standard for how far the PlayStation can be pushed when a team focused on direction and clarity. And you can feel that intent in every single level. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you. And if you're enjoying it, consider subbing to the channel. There's a lot of content already on there, and a lot more coming. And if you're having a good time with this one, a like really helps also. And for the mobile viewers, there's also the hype button. Hitting that adds hype points, and it tells the algorithm, hey, this video is good, show it to more people. It's a way that you can directly help the channel grow. It is only available in the first 7 days of the video's life though, so after that, a like will still help a lot. But drop me a comment too. Have you ever played Einhänder? I know some people found it on a demo disc back in the day, but maybe this is your first time seeing it. Let me know. I always love reading the memories you all leave me in these videos. But that's enough of that. Let's get into the mechanics and the weapon system that's in the game. The game builds everything around the gun arm. The ship starts with a light machine gun, but the arm underneath is the real focus here. It lets you grab weapons straight off enemies. And that idea drives the entire game. Every encounter becomes a chance to change or upgrade your setup. And the stages are built with that in mind. The gun pods drop when you destroy the right part of the enemy, because you can actually shoot the gun and destroy it. Some carry Vulcans, which is like a minigun, some carry cannons, some carry missile launchers, and there's even some short-range weapons like a blade. And picking up duplicates just boosts your ammo with it. When a gun pod runs dry, it falls away and goes back to whatever else you're carrying. The system pushes you to watch the field and target certain enemies before others, because the right weapon can change how the section feels. Your ship model determines how many gun pods you can store. Some carry 1, some carry 3. The placement matters too. Mounting a gun pod on top changes its firing angle, mounting it underneath gives it a different line. And some of the guns just completely change how they shoot depending on where they're mounted. For example, a rocket launcher, if it's mounted on the bottom, it just shoots forward, but if it's mounted on the top, it turns into heat-seeking. So it adds a layer of strategy, and this shapes how you move during fights. A high-mounted weapon helps with enemies that stay above you, and a low-mounted one lines up with formations that sweep the bottom of the screen. These small details like this guide how you approach each section. And all the gun pods work differently. The cannon fires these slow, heavy rounds, the Vulcan lays down steady machine gun fire. The Wasp launches missiles. Each one fits certain encounters. Some are great during open waves, some work better on bosses. The game lets you experiment, and the stages help you figure out what makes sense for your run. And ammo is always a factor. Every gun pod has a limited amount, and you burn through it very quickly. New drops keep you supplied, but only if you're willing to swap. If your slots are full and a weapon drifts towards you, you might replace something you want to keep, and when that happens you start dodging pickups instead of chasing them. It adds pressure when things get really busy because you're watching your firing lanes and your movement while also trying to not grab the wrong thing. Positioning ties the whole system together. The angles on your weapons lock in place once they're mounted, so you move to match the fire pattern you need. Some enemies come in from above, others push from below. Some bosses form patterns that only line up with certain angles. You adjust by shifting your ship into the lanes that support the weapon you're using. And over time it becomes second nature, and the stages start to flow around the choices you make. The control keeps that flow steady. The game runs very smoothly and the inputs still feel good. The gun arm adds a bit of strategy without slowing anything down. You shoot, reposition, grab a new weapon, and just keep moving. That rhythm settles in pretty quickly, and the mechanics stay readable even when the screen gets crowded. Einhänder keeps its rules pretty simple, and that gives all the systems just room to shine. Mechanics give the game its identity. The gun arm shapes your decisions, the weapon drops guide your route through each stage, and the angles give movement more purpose than for most shooters from that time. The game rewards players who learn how to build a loadout on the fly, and that structure keeps the action moving throughout the whole game. The game builds momentum through its stages, but the bosses are where everything you've learned really starts to matter. Each one feels like its own problem to solve. You move through the levels picking up new weapons, managing your gun arm, and trying to stay alive long enough to build a loadout you trust. And then the game drops you into a fight that tests how well you paid attention. The first time you see a boss come on the screen, you understand what the team wanted from these encounters. They wanted movement, they wanted pressure, and they wanted you to study what you were seeing instead of just trying to overpower it. Grief is the first real example of this. It slides onto the screen with a set of weapons that force you to move in ways the stage didn't prepare you for. It fires spreads, it locks into angles, and it gives you just enough time between each attack to read what's coming next. The pattern stays consistent once you recognize it. You sit in a space where you dodge, fire, and track how long each attack lasts. The fight teaches you a rhythm. Move, fire, wait, move, fire, wait. That carryover is what makes the later bosses feel natural. The game introduces complexity, but it never stops giving you time to understand the motion. The next major encounters build on that idea. Draw shifts between long sweeps and direct shots. It uses movement across the entire screen, and you have to keep a steady pace just to stay alive. When it aims, you read its angle. When it repositions, you get a window to fire back. The parts on his body react to damage, so you start picking targets that matter. Some attacks get weaker when you break a section, some moves disappear entirely. None of this is explained though, you learn it by watching how each boss reacts when you pick it apart. spin changes the pace again. Every action has a clear tell. The legs shift before a charge, the body lights up before a shot. You start reading these cues faster as the fight goes on. That's part of Einhänder that stands out if you've played anything like Dark Souls. You see an enemy show you a move, you watch how long it lasts, you find the opening, and then the fight rewards patience because you learn how each machine behaves when it changes phases. Nothing feels cheap, the patterns are there from the start. Salamander works in the same way. It brings long-range beams and slow rotations that push you around the arena. You react to the timing, a laser charges for a second, and a set of missiles launches and arcs into your space. You break a section and the pattern shifts to something new. You start seeing how important your weapon choices really are. The shotgun helps when a boss crowds the screen, a focused shot helps when a weak point sits behind armor. A heavier gun eats through ammo fast, and you feel the tension because losing a weapon mid-fight forces you to adapt. Hyperion really closes out the idea. It presses you with attacks that really require a lot of tight movement. You dodge, you adjust your speed, and you fire carefully to avoid losing a weapon you might need. The fight gives you just enough freedom to manage the pressure without letting you coast through it. The parts break one at a time, the pattern develops into something you can manage. The entire encounter feels like a final exam of everything the game has taught through motion, timing, and positioning. That steady flow from one attack to the next creates the same feeling you get from studying bosses in action games like Dark Souls. You learn tales, commit them to memory, and build a plan around them. Einhänder pushes that mindset through every big enemy. You have to move inside small spaces, track visual cues, and use your weapons in a way that becomes second nature by the end. The bosses stand out because they never rush you through the process of learning them. They show you enough to understand what you're facing, and they stay consistent enough to let you grow into each fight at your own pace. That's the appeal for me. Einhänder uses these encounters to reinforce how the game wants you to play. You read patterns and manage the pressure, and you build the confidence one attack at a time. The bosses hit extremely hard, but they play fair. And once you learn how to read them, the flow of each fight starts to feel like the point of the whole experience. The game sets its story up in a way that gives you enough to understand the world without slowing anything down. It takes place during the Second Moon War, a conflict between Earth and the colony on the moon. The names come from Greek mythology. Selene is the home of the moon forces. Endymion shows up in the naming of certain units and missions. The game builds its tone around those references and uses them to frame the conflict without going into long explanations. You fly for Selene, the colony needs resources, and the war is built around that struggle. Earth has what the moon wants, and that tension shapes the mission you take part in. The story in the manual talks about limited nitrogen and a long history of fighting between the two sides. Einhänder fits into that later stage of the conflict. You're sent to Earth on a mission that has a clear goal and a short life expectancy. Selene treats pilots like disposable assets. The Einhänder units reinforce that idea. Each one is a single pilot craft with a manipulator arm, and they're used for high-risk strikes meant to push the war forward. The game never pauses to explain all this in detail. It uses level progression to show the state of the world. You start in the lower sections of Earth City. Buildings sit in rough shape, roads pass under worn structures. The sky stays heavy with smoke and light. The war's taken a toll on the environment, so the backgrounds show ruin, debris, and long belts of machinery. The later levels move into military zones and secured facilities. Each area feels like a new part of the conflict. You push through layers of defense, and each layer hints at what the Earth side is willing to protect. The bosses really support that sense of escalation. The earlier ones act like patrol units or border guards. Around mid-game, encounters feel prepared to intercept whatever Selene sends their way. And then the late-game bosses feel more like Gundam mechs. They're warriors, and their patterns tell you how advanced Earth's defenses have become. They look built for the final stage of a long fight. The way they move and attack helps sell the idea that the war has reached a point where both sides rely on specialized machines to handle the hardest parts of the conflict. The game really uses music to reinforce the tone also. Tracks shift based on where you are. Urban areas have a sharper sound and military zones feel heavier. The space segments have a colder atmosphere. The soundtrack fills in the emotional gaps that the story leaves open. It gives you a sense of what each area represents without needing dialogue or long scenes. The narrative stays in the background with this, but it still builds momentum. As you move through the stages, you get the feeling that your pilot doesn't have much agency. Missions come in over a radio, orders stay simple. You move forward, complete objectives, and push deeper into enemy territory. The story treats the pilot as part of a larger machine. Your ship is small compared to the environments and the bosses. That scale reinforces the idea that you are one piece of a much bigger conflict. The ending reflects that theme also. The final stage takes you off Earth and into a setting that shows how far the war is stretched. You can feel the shift in tone as the camera pulls back and the environments open up. The last battles show how much both sides have invested in this conflict. There's a sense of finality in the last encounter. The story doesn't need long explanations though, because the pacing of the stages delivers the message clearly. Einhänder tells its story through motions and environment and the way each stage connects to each other. It doesn't rely on text or big cutscenes to build the world. The background shows the cost of the war. The orders you receive show how little your life matters to the people in charge. And the bosses show the scale of the conflict. It creates a world that feels lived in, even with the limited storytelling. The game trusts you to piece these things together as you fly. And that approach gives the narrative a quiet weight that really still holds up. This game dropped during a time when Square was trying all kinds of projects. They had just come off the success of their giant RPGs, and the studio had room to explore smaller ideas. Most people knew them for Final Fantasy, but inside the company there were teams building things that didn't follow the usual path. Einhänder came out of that environment. The early sales in Japan were extremely strong, and it didn't take long for critics to pick up on how focused the game felt. And looking back now, the game stands out because of how steady it is. The PlayStation had a lot of shooters, but not many with this level of direction. The 2.5D style gave the team space to set up scenes with depth, and the way the game runs makes those choices hold up. The frame rate stays solid, the action stays readable, and the camera moves in ways that help the player follow what's happening. The team knew what they wanted the game to look like, and it shows in the way every stage flows. A lot of people missed this when it first came out. Shooters were fading here in the West, and the market was leaning more towards full 3D action games. Einhänder didn't have a big push behind it either, so it reached a smaller audience. And over time, that created its reputation. People found it later, talked about it with friends, and passed it along to anyone who liked the genre. The steady word of mouth helped it turn into one of those games people bring up when talking about things the PlayStation handled well. The weapon system played a major part in that. The idea of taking weapons from enemies during a fight and building your run around what you collected made it stand out. Other shooters picked up pieces of that approach later. Some used similar movement choices, some borrowed parts of the presentation. When people look back at the timeline of the genre, Einhänder shows up because of the work it did in that space. The game's rarity added another layer too. Physical copies became pretty hard to find, and the lack of re-releases made it even tougher for new players to try it. Fans kept it alive through recommendations and small communities though. When people make lists of hidden PlayStation games, Einhänder appears because it fits the exact story. A focused project with a clear vision that didn't get recycled or reintroduced through new hardware. Square never returned to the idea. There were no follow-ups or new versions. The game ended up as a single entry inside a company mostly known for a different type of work. That gives it a unique place in their history. It's one of those projects that shows how far a team could push the hardware when the goals were clear and the direction stayed tight. And playing it today feels the same as it did then because the foundation was strong from the start. The controls still respond the right way, the pacing stays really sharp, and the design choices hold steady across the whole game. Some shooters from that era lean on memories to stay relevant. Einhänder holds up through the way it plays and presents itself. New players can pick it up without needing any background. Its impact comes from that consistency. It showed how the PlayStation could handle fast movement, clean visuals, and smart camera work in a single package. It left an impression on the people who connected with it, and that memory carried forward in conversations long after it came out. It's a game worth keeping around, and it benefits from the kind of preservation that helps these projects stay accessible for anyone who wants to see what made them stand out. I really hope you all enjoyed this video. I'm dropping it in the middle of the week as a bonus extra video, and honestly, I've been excited to show you something a little different. Einhänder isn't the kind of game I usually cover, but I wanted to see how you all felt about me pushing my range a bit, and trusting me enough to follow me wherever I go with these videos. I've made a lot of horror content lately, and I love doing it, but Jake Saverum has always been about more than just horror. It's about the memories, the games that hit us at the right time, and the stuff nobody else wants to talk about. So if you've made it to the end, I really appreciate you being here and trusting me with that. I love playing these games and talking about them, especially the ones like this. There's a reason I picked Einhänder for a bonus video. I wanted to show what Jake Saverum actually is. I wanted to show how wide it reaches and the kind of titles I'm going to bring forward simply because no one else will. And my goal here is simple. Whenever someone sees a game that they've never heard of, I want that little thought to pop up. I wonder if Jake covered that. I want to bring these games back into the conversation and keep the memories of them alive. And if you're following me into that, thank you, and it really does mean a lot. This one isn't replacing next weekend's video for Resident Evil Dead Aim. I've been working on these side by side, and I just wanted to drop this one as a little surprise. And I hope you liked it, because I really want to mix in more games like this that sit outside the horror lane. The Mark of Kree and Dark Cloud have been poking me in the back of the head lately. And if you haven't yet, consider subbing, dropping a like, and leaving me a comment. I really enjoy reading your all's comments. But, as always, I'll see y'all later.